High on a hill in Dorset, there's this jagged crown of stone that just slices into the sky. That's Corfe Castle. It's a sentinel that has watched over 1,000 years of English history. We're talking everything from royal assassinations to the boom of Civil War cannons. So we're going to dive into how this incredible fortress rose, exactly why it was so brutally torn down, and how its violent past, well, it still seems to echo among its ruins today.
Just look at this. You're looking at a ruin that was never, ever meant to be a ruin. I mean, it was built from this tough, local Purbeck limestone to be a symbol of power that would stand forever. But this castle didn't just slowly crumble over time. Nope, it was brought down in a single, violent, and very deliberate act.
So, to really get why it was destroyed, we have to go all the way back to the beginning. Back to when Corfe was this terrifying instrument of royal authority, a place of immense power, incredible wealth, and let's be honest, a whole lot of fear.
This timeline just shows you the sheer depth of history we're dealing with here. Even before the Normans showed up, this spot was a stage for some serious royal drama. A Saxon king was murdered right here back in 978. Then, along comes William the Conqueror, who builds one of England's very first stone castles. It holds strong through a civil war, and then later it becomes a favorite hangout for the notorious King John. I mean, this place is just soaked in history.
You know what's really fascinating is that Corfe was so much more than just a military base. Think about it. It was a bank, literally holding the crown jewels. It was a high-security prison for anyone who threatened the throne. And it was a palace with super luxurious comforts that were absolutely cutting edge for the 13th century. It was the whole shebang.
And you can't talk about Corfe without talking about King John. He poured a fortune into this place, adding lavish apartments and making its walls even stronger. But he's also the one who really cemented its dark reputation. He used it to imprison his own niece, Eleanor of Brittany, for years, basically locking away a potential rival for his throne.
Okay, so let's jump forward a few centuries because the castle's history is about to take a seriously dramatic turn. We're in the 17th century now, right in the middle of the English Civil War, and Corfe's destiny is about to fall into the hands of one of the most amazing women in English history. Meet Lady Mary Banks. Her husband was off fighting for the king, so she was in charge. When parliamentarian forces showed up and demanded she surrender her home, she basically said, "No way." And what she did next, well, it became the stuff of legend.
Just look at these numbers. It's insane. During the first siege, Lady Banks had maybe 80 people inside to defend the castle. The army outside, up to 600 soldiers. The odds were completely impossible. And yet, for 6 long weeks, she held them off.
But in the end, this mighty fortress wasn't brought down by cannon fire or starvation. It fell because of betrayal. One of her own officers, a guy named Colonel Pittman, secretly let the enemy in. But even though she was betrayed, Lady Banks's courage had earned the respect of her enemies. They let her walk out with her honor, still holding the keys to her lost home. But Parliament, they had one final, brutal order. And this is how we get the ruin we see today. Its destruction wasn't an accident, not at all. It was a systematic political demolition job, a science of destruction, and it's actually pretty chilling. There's a specific word for this: slighting. See, Parliament didn't just want to capture the castle. They wanted to erase it as a military threat forever. So they brought in sappers, who were basically expert demolitionists, to tear it apart from the inside.
So, these engineers packed the castle's weak points with gunpowder and boom. The explosions blew the towers outwards, leaving them leaning at these crazy, impossible angles. But here's what's so incredible. As the castle fell, the village below rose. The villagers came and took the fallen stones to build their own houses. The symbol of royal power literally became the fabric of the community.
And right in the middle of all that destruction, someone left a very personal mark. On one of the stones, you can still find the initials RP and the date, 1645. It's a permanent piece of graffiti carved by one of the very men who brought this giant crashing to its knees.
You know, with a history that bloody, it's really no surprise that Corfe Castle's story didn't end with its destruction. Its stones might have crumbled, but its spirit, well, it lived on in ghost stories and folklore.
The most famous ghost here is the Headless White Lady, who they say is the spirit of the woman who betrayed the castle. But if you listen closely, you might hear other whispers. The cries of a lost child, the distant scream of that murdered Saxon king, and even the phantom tramp of a Roman legion still marching on roads that have long since disappeared.
And these legends are literally woven into the landscape. There's a path near the castle that locals still call Traitor's Walk. It's believed to be the exact route the betrayer took to let the enemy sneak inside. The memory of that treachery is literally carved into the earth itself.
But the castle's story isn't just about destruction and ghosts. In its ruin, Corfe found a totally new, and you could argue, an even more powerful life.
Those shattered towers and leaning walls, they became an obsession for artists like the famous J.M.W. Turner. The ruin wasn't just a failed fortress anymore. It became this beautiful, tragic symbol of a lost world. It was the perfect, picturesque landscape.
And this new chapter continued right into the 20th century. For generations of kids, the ruins became Ciaran Castle in Enid Blyton's famous 5 books. And then, in this final incredible act of generosity, the Banks family, yep, the descendants of Lady Mary, gifted the entire castle to the National Trust in 1982, making sure its story would be preserved for all of us.
So that brings us to this final thought. Corfe Castle was built to be this unbreakable symbol of power, and in that, it failed. But in its spectacular failure, it became something else entirely, an inspiration for artists, a playground for our imaginations, and a timeless monument to defiance and memory. It makes you wonder, right? Maybe its true purpose was never to stand, but to fall.